Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's event, Redefining Sustainment, Logistics as a Weapon System, Part 1. Before we begin, I'd like to make a few administrative announcements. If you're unable to see the content or the meeting chat today, please try disconnecting from your organizational VPN if possible. Otherwise, you may use a personal device. Speaker slides are available for download at the event page. Following the event, please use the link we'll provide in chat to access a short survey. At the end of the survey, you can request a certificate be sent to you, which you can use to request one continuous learning point. Please follow your organizational guidance regarding requesting the CLP, and remember, CLPs for DAU events will not post automatically, and you must request them separately. And now I'll turn it over to Dr. Abram Marsh to get us started today.
Good afternoon. Great to see my friend, Brigadier General Kent. Thank you for joining me this afternoon for this webinar. And again, I want to thank all of you all for joining us today. We are in for a treat. General Kent and I have gone back a couple years, back to our time on the Joint Staff. And what we're going to talk about today is redefining logistics and logistics as a weapon system. And so with that, sorry about that, my system decided to give a black screen. So with that, as Ali pointed out, what we want everybody to do is be mindful as we talk today. Be respectful in your posts. We'll be looking at what you say in chat, and then we'll have a opportunity at the end to ask a couple questions. We've also had several questions provided to us over the last several weeks, and we'll incorporate that in our moderated discussion. This information is unclassified and publicly available content, and please note that we will not discuss any detailed military service or DoD efforts or actions. So I'll do a quick intro of both myself and General Kent. I am a professor of logistics here with DAU. I come to you with a pretty extensive background in life cycle logistics, both in the Air Force on the Joint Staff and OSD, as well as in private industry. And my most recent position before retiring out of the Air Force was with the F-35 Joint Program Office. And so, as you know, we'll talk with General Kent today on logistics as a weapon system. And General Kent comes to us with 3 decades of military service, currently assigned to U.S. Army Materiel Command. He has served as the Director of Logistics for European Command, and throughout his career he has served in multiple roles on joint special operations and conventional assignments. His command tours include leading the 4th Infantry Sustainment Brigade at Fort Carson, Colorado, 2 previous battalion level logistics commands with the 82nd Airborne and with Special Mission Unit within U.S. Army Special Operations Command. With that, I bring to you General Kent, who will provide us a presentation on logistics as a weapon system. General Kent, the floor is yours.
Dr. Marsh, you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Yeah, I didn't hesitate for a moment when you called and asked me to do this. Yeah, we've been friends for a long time, 15 years since we were in the basement of the Pentagon. And I learned a whole heck of a lot from you, and I know there's a lot of people that are learning from you each and every day. So, let me just get straight to the heart of the matter. We are living in an area where logistics is no longer background support. It is the battlefield, and adversaries don't separate combat forces from supply lines anymore. They live stream convoys with commercial drones. They disrupt pipelines with cyber attacks, and they force container ships to reroute thousands of miles with improvised threats. They manipulate commodity markets to slow operational tempo without firing a single shot. And because of global connectivity, satellites, social media, commercial ISR, every depot, every bridge, every port is visible, vulnerable, and contestable. That reality demands a reorientation in how we think about sustainment. It cannot remain transactional. It cannot be the afterthought that follows strategy. It is strategy. And this is where the acquisition community comes in, because every program you write, every contract that is signed, every sustainment system fielded, it either strengthens or it weakens our ability to endure contestation. Logistics decisions today don't just deliver material to the force, they shape whether or not that force can fight, adapt, and prevail when disrupted. So my charge to the audience today is simple. We must begin to treat sustainment as a weapon system in its own right, one that can be measured, hardened, innovated, and employed, all for battlefield advantage. And so over the next 30 minutes or so, I'll walk you through this idea in 4 moves. So like 1, why is logistics contested today and why that changes everything? How we contest logistics through visibility and agility and resilience. How we can measure advantage using a methodology that I had developed over the past couple of years, which I call the Defense Performance Score. And then I want to talk a little bit about how we operationalize that at scale through the frameworks like the Regional Sustainment Framework and other innovations that future-proofs sustainment. So if there's one thing that I want to leave you with at the end, it is this. Sustainment is not the backdrop to the fight. It is the fight. And that is why we must redefine it as a weapons system. So let's proceed and go to the next slide. So I've titled this talk, Redefining Sustainment, Logistics as a Weapons System, but what does that actually mean? Traditionally, sustainment has been viewed as support. The mindset was simple. You plan the fight, and then you resource it. Logistics was the enabler, the background variable, and the bridge between strategy and execution. That mindset doesn't hold any longer because the reality is stark. Adversaries are now targeting supply chains with the same intensity that they target frontline forces. Convoys live streamed by commercial drones, pipelines disrupted by cyber intrusion. Container ships forced thousands of miles off course by improvised threats. Commodity markets manipulated to slow operational tempo, all without firing a single shot. In this environment, sustainment is no longer transactional. It cannot be an afterthought. It must be strategy. To redefine sustainment as a weapon system means 4 things. First, it means logistics must be measured. You cannot fight with guesswork. Just as we measure combat readiness in sortie rates or missile availability, we must measure sustainment in throughput, restoration times, and disruption tempo. If we can't quantify that, we can't rebound from an attack. Second, it means logistics must be contested. We can't assume permissive lines of communication any longer. Every depot, every convoy, every pipeline must be hardened, hidden, and adaptive. We must anticipate disruption as routine and not exception, and train our sustainment forces accordingly. Third, it means logistics must be optimized through innovation. And what that means, predictive analytics that tell us when a bridge will collapse, additive manufacturing that prints replacement parts forward, AI that reroutes cargo before the adversary strikes. Innovation isn't just about efficiency. It's about survivability under pressure. Fourth, it means logistics must be weaponized. Now, weaponization here doesn't mean militarizing supply chains. It means treating them as combat capabilities in their own right. A hardened fuel depot is a deterrent. A resilient multinational supply network is a strategic signal. A logistics system that rebounds faster than an adversary can retarget is a weapon of tempo, denying our enemies of the initiative. So think of it this way. A fighter jet without fuel is just a static display. A brigade without ammo is an obstacle. It's not a maneuver unit. Sustainment is what transforms forces from potential into power. And that makes it a weapon system as decisive as any missile or aircraft. For the acquisition community, this shift carries enormous implications because every decision, what infrastructure we fund, what software we procure, what sustainment contracts we write, either builds logistics as a weapon system or it leaves it as a vulnerability. Acquisition professionals are no longer just resourcing the fight, they are shaping the fight itself. And this is where I want to be very clear. If we fail to redefine sustainment in these terms, we risk being outpaced before the fight even begins. The adversary will not wait to engage our forces at the front line. They will collapse us from the rear, strangling mobility, starving tempo, and breaking momentum. This is not a future risk. It is a current reality playing out today in the Ukraine, in the South China Sea, and across our global networks, global commercial networks, that is. So when I say redefining sustainment, logistics as a weapon system, I mean this. Logistics is no longer a background function. It's an operational imperative. It is contested, measurable, optimizable, and weaponizable. So here's the lift line. Sustainment is not support. It is the fight. And that's the theme that will carry through everything I share with you today. So let's proceed to the next slide and we'll continue. And we'll look at why logistics is contested. So now that we've defined why sustainment must be treated as a weapon system, let's step back and look at the global context that demands this reevaluation. For much of modern history, we've operated under the assumption that logistics would flow freely once combat power was unleashed. In World War II, even with the threat of U-boats, once we secured the sea lanes, convoys moved with relative certainty. In Desert Storm, our logisticians pulled off the largest buildup since World War II without sustained contestation of ports, rail, or depots. And in Iraq and Afghanistan, we faced roadside bombs and ambushes, but the global logistics backbone remained largely secure from state-level attack. That assumption is gone. And the war in the Ukraine has shattered that. The very first targets were not brigades or fighter wings. They were rail hubs, ammunition depots, and energy grids. Russia's intent was clear: cut the arteries and the body collapses. And on the other side, Russia's own convoys were paralyzed, not by artillery barrages, but by something far simpler: flat tires, empty tanks, and supply lines too fragile to adapt. Logistics was not a supporting act, it was a battlefield itself. So let's shift to the Indo-Pacific. The geography alone makes sustainment a contested proposition. Thousands of miles of ocean, limited ports and airfields, and all of it under the constant shadow of precision strike networks. Add in the cyber threats against cranes, pipelines, and satellites, and you now have an environment where logistics is designed to be disrupted before the very first shot. This is denial by distance, amplified by technology. And it doesn't stop there. Contestation is not limited to conventional battlefields. Non-kinetic threats strike just as hard. Commercial drones, live stream convoys in real time, erasing secrecy. A cyber attack on a single pipeline can halt operations across an entire theater. Commodity markets can be manipulated to spike fuel or grain prices, stalling momentum without an adversary ever crossing a border. Even the information domain plays a role. Narratives targeting the legitimacy of logistics networks can erode political will to sustain those campaigns. So the lesson is this: logistics today is not incidentally at risk, it is deliberately targeted, systematically, persistently, on a global scale. Here's the way I would describe it. In modern war, there are no rear areas, only gradients of exposure. That single sentence captures the shift. There is no sanctuary. Every convoy is a target, every depot an objective, and every network a point of failure. So what does this mean for us? It means we can no longer treat sustainment as a background process. We cannot assume permissive routes or secured depots. We must design logistics for contestation, visible enough to command, agile enough to adapt, and resilient enough to survive. And this is not just theory. We've seen it play out across various crises. Even the Ever Given blocked the Suez Canal. It was a civilian accident, but it froze global trade for 6 days. That one choke point rippled across industries, militaries, and markets. What happens when an adversary chooses to replicate that disruption deliberately? The demand for reevaluation is not an option for us. It is an operational imperative. And for the acquisition community, this context means that sustainment cannot be designed as a permissive system. Contracts, procurement, and doctrine must assume disruption. They must embed redundancy, deception, and recovery into the very fabric of logistics. Because the global environment we operate is not forgiving, it is actively hostile to sustainment. And if we don't adjust, we risk finding ourselves with the best combat forces in the world, stranded without the means to move supply, or endure. And that is the context for contesting logistics. That is why we must reevaluate everything we think we know about sustainment in the military. If we could move to the next slide, please. Now, let's move from the global context to the problem itself. And logistics, that's the one, yeah, thanks. Logistics as a deliberate target. For decades, our doctrine treated logistics as a background function. Forces maneuvered, commanders fought, and logisticians ensured the flow in the rear. Excuse me. But today, adversaries have flipped that logic on its head. They know that if they can disrupt the flow, they don't need to destroy the force. They can simply starve it, immobilize it, and wait for the momentum to collapse. That is why logistics has become the first target. Look at the Ukraine again. The opening salvos didn't focus on frontline brigades. They hit rail hubs, ammunition depots, and power grids. Destroy the arteries, and the body dies. Russia's own failure mirrored that lesson. Convoys stalled not by artillery, but by flat tires, empty Bowsers and logistics systems that were just too brittle to adapt. Logistics wasn't peripheral, it was decisive. And so, look over to the Indo-Pacific. Here is the challenge, which isn't just enemy strikes, but the geography itself. Thousands of miles of ocean, limited ports and airfields, contested sea lanes, all under the constant surveillance of precision strike networks. Now, add cyber attacks on cranes, pipelines, and satellites, and the supply line becomes a primary target long before the first shot is even fired. This is denial by distance, amplified by precision and cyber reach. And the threat's not limited to kinetic action. Non-kinetic tools are just as dangerous. Commercial drones, those live stream convoys, stripping away the secrecy. Cyber attacks can disable a pipeline or corrupt a rail system. Commodity markets can be manipulated to raise the price of fuel or wheat, slowing tempo without a single round fired. And in the information space, those narratives questioning the legitimacy of supply networks can erode political will to sustain those campaigns, as we've discussed. The pattern's clear. In modern conflict, sustainment is not collateral. It is the bullseye. And, I often describe it as supply lines are the battle lines. That sentence captures this transformation of thought. There is no protected rear area, no sanctuary depot, no untouchable port. Every node is vulnerable. Every convoy is exposed. Every supply line is a target. And what does this mean operationally? It means sustainment must be designed for contestation, not efficiency alone. Traditional doctrine optimized for throughput in permissive environments. Modern doctrine must optimize for survivability under attack. And this means redundancy, deception, rapid recovery, and hardened systems. For acquisition professionals, this shift has profound implications. If supply chains are contested as just as contested as combat forces, this shift is paramount. The design of sustainment software, the contracts for mobility, all of these must assume they will be attacked, degraded, and contested. Systems must be funded not for efficiency alone, but for resilience under fire. And this is where the problem sharpens. We cannot rely on assumptions of access, freedom of movement, or uncontested depots. To continue with that mindset is to design fragility into the force. And fragility is a vulnerability an adversary will exploit. So understanding the problem begins here. Logistics, no longer the background, no longer safe, no longer transactional. It is the deliberate target of modern warfare, kinetic, cyber, economic, and informational. And if sustainment is such the target, then we have to build systems and teams and acquisition strategies that treat it as such. That is why we shift next into the framework for contesting logistics, how visibility, agility, and resilience transform sustainment from a vulnerability into an advantage. Now let's move to the next slide, and we're going to talk about winning. So we've talked about the problem, logistics as a target, laid out the framework, visibility, agility, and resilience. That's the right side. And here is the next critical question. How do we know if we're winning a contest? And so this is where the defense performance score comes in. At its core, the DPS is a yardstick for contested sustainment. It's a model that I built out of what I believe was necessity. Over and over, I saw the same gap. We could tell you how many jets were mission capable, how many tanks were mission capable, but not whether the sustainment system was resilient enough to endure the next disruption. We had the anecdotes, we had the after action reviews, but we didn't have a real-time measure of logistics advantage. And so the DPS fills that gap. So it blends multiple indices into one score. So the Defense Readiness Index, DRI, is a measure of baseline posture, forces, equipment, networks, and infrastructure available to sustain operations. And that can be applied to any ally. What's not on the screen is the Defense Threat and Risk Index, a measure of adversary ability to disrupt, deny, and degrade those flows. It hits on all those threat scales. It hits on the geopolitical threats, climate change, the weather, all types of various threats, cyber. And then we get into the adaptive capacity index, which is a measure of how quickly we can reconfigure, reroute, and scale sustainment in response to disruption. And the resilience capacity index, which is a measurement, it would be a measurement of how well systems withstand deliberate attack, absorb damage, and maintain essential operations. So when you put these together, put those indices together, it will generate a multi-dimensional picture of sustainment, not just what we have, but how adaptable it is, how resilient it is, and how vulnerable it is under active contestation. If you can't measure it, you can't rebound. So what do we have to measure? And I see three key metrics that sit underneath these indices. First, throughput, not theoretical, not planned, real tons per day delivered where it matters. If throughput slows, readiness falters. Second, mean time to restore. Okay. When a node goes down, how fast can we get it back online? This is benchmarked against adversary retargeting cycles. If we can restore faster than they can retarget, we maintain momentum. Third, disruption tempo. This measures whether we're dictating rhythm or reacting to theirs. Cycling denial, deception, and deterrence every 12 hours forces adversaries to chase shadows, and it keeps us inside their decision loop. Together, these metrics power the indices, and together these indices power DPS. It's not just a score, it's a picture of how sustainment performs under fire. Here's how it changes the conversation. The DRI, the readiness index, alone tells us posture. DTRI tells us the threat. When we add ACI and RCI, we capture the dynamic qualities of sustainment, its ability to flex, absorb, and rebound. Without ACI and RCI, DPS, and I apologize, I'm doing the ABCs for you all. But without those, it would just be static accounting. And with them, it becomes a living measure of sustainment advantage. For the acquisition community, that's the critical insight. The DPS is not just a model, it's a design principle. It tells us we need systems built to measure themselves, contracts that track throughput automatically, depots that record restoration times as a matter of course, and networks that log disruption tempo and adaptation cycles in real time. If we don't design those measurement points into platforms and infrastructure up front, we're left flying blind. We can't manage what we can't measure. And this is why I built that model, because without a scoreboard, sustainment remains invisible until it fails. And with DPS, we have a common picture across services, allies, and industry. Now, I've tested this approach to the Poland Baltics region. And the idea would be that predictive analytics would flag instability in a rail interchange, right? Customs friction in the ideal world is resolved in 24 hours through diplomatic action. And when throughput dips 7% week over week, targeted airlift restored momentum without a full-scale lift plan. That's measurement turning into action, and that's the DPS in practice. So one truth means everyone, from the forward motor pool to the Pentagon, acts on the same operational picture. This is one truth, one tempo, and that gives us the competitive advantage. One tempo means we move faster than adversaries can disrupt. So why did I build that model? Because I saw firsthand that without measurement, logistics remains a vulnerability. And with DPS, it becomes a weapon system, measurable, adaptable, resilient, and decisive. And it supports the public-private partnerships. Targeting, right? Targeting precisely what it is that needs that type of investment. So that's how we turn sustainment from a target through a targeting cycle into an edge. So next I'll show you what this looks like when you apply this at scale through the regional sustainment framework. If we can go to the next slide. So we talked about the problem, logistics as a target. We've built a framework, visibility, agility, and resilience. We've introduced the tool, DPS, to measure advantage. Now let's talk about what this looks like in practice. Building resilient sustainment networks that ensure readiness by design, not assumption. During my time at US European Command, the greatest challenge that we face over there isn't the lack of capability, it's fragmentation. Every nation has its own logistics nodes, its own sustainment policies, its own mobility plans. NATO, the EU, and the US all ran parallel, but unaligned efforts. And so in a crisis, this means friction, delay, and duplication. So operationalizing the regional sustainment framework, applying it to Europe, regional sustainment framework Europe, is to build to solve that. Its core idea is simple: turn logistics from a patchwork of national stovepipes into a shared alliance weapon system. A web that is bigger, stronger, and more resilient than the sum of its parts. So what does that look like in practice? Well, first, dual use infrastructure. So take the port of Zadar in Croatia as an example. By investing in facilities that handle both civilian and military traffic, this creates a node that functions in peacetime commerce, but flips seamlessly to military cargo in crisis. And because it supports commercial trade, political support and funding are stronger. Civilian benefits reinforce military resilience. That's design. That's not assumption. Second, multinational maintenance and repair. The Ukraine provides the clearest case study. It forces fight with a hybrid fleet, Western systems and Soviet-era equipment side by side, without shared multinational MRO hubs. That diversity would cripple readiness. The regional sustainment framework for Europe advances the idea of maintenance hubs across Europe capable of handling multiple families of equipment. That's more than fixing tanks or aircraft. It's interoperability embedded into sustainment. Third, corridor concepts. The regional sustainment framework for Europe aligns the NATO's regional sustainment network with the EU's trans-European transport network. That means the same corridors that move civilian trade also move military convoys. Every euro that's invested in EU civilian mobility doubles as an investment in NATO resilience. And in effect, civilian infrastructure becomes pre-cleared, dual-funded military infrastructure. That's sufficient. But more importantly, it's resilient. Fourth, industry integration. So for the regional sustainment framework, you don't stop at military and government assets. You pull in private sector partners, rail operators, energy providers, port authorities, and we build industry integration cells to embed them in crisis planning, not just to call them in after the fact. In contested logistics, industries is not an external vendor, it's the fifth service. Or six with Space Force. So the outcome of the sustainment framework is a network that is harder to disrupt, faster to recover, and more resilient at scale. Instead of 32 nations moving independently, we develop a shared playbook. Instead of bottlenecks or at the borders, building agreements to cut customs clearance from weeks to hours. Instead of siloed planning, we build joint assessments that identify bridges, tunnels, and ports as single points of failure and creates redundancy plans before a crisis. So this isn't just Europe that I talk about. This principle applies globally. And in the Indo-Pacific, resilient networks will mean modular fuel farms that hop from atoll to atoll. In Africa, it will mean solar-driven water production that reduces lift demand. In the Arctic, it will mean pre-positioned stocks hardened for extreme cold. Resilient networks are always regional, always tailored, but always built on the same principles: dual use, multinational, integrated, and measured. And so for the acquisition community, this lesson is this: readiness must be ensured by design, not by assumption. And that means writing dual use standards into procurement contracts, building multilateral sustainment agreements into acquisition planning, funding resilient networks that measure and adapt in real time, and treating industry partners as core combat enablers. And this is how sustainment moves from fragile to resilient, from vulnerable to weaponized. And that's what we mean by ensuring readiness by design. It's not about hoping our supply chains hold, it's about building them so they can't easily be broken. So stay with me, we're almost done. Slide, please. So as we come to the towards the close, I want to leave you with the key takeaways, the pillars that tie all this together, right? And so strategic reorientation, that's the first one. We must weaponize sustainment today while planning for tomorrow. That means shifting from traditional efficiency focused logistics towards contested sustainment frameworks. It means seeing logistics not as a background, but as an operational imperative. And it means thinking strategically, playing chess, not checkers. Preemptive posture, modular dark nodes, route churn, and climate adaptation are not optional extras. They are the new baseline for survivability. Second, the operational framework. So logistics is the generator of success or failure. To make it effective, we need a clear three-tiered framework. Tier 1, operational, immediate mission support at the tactical edge. Tier 2, tactical, regional coordination across corridors and partners. Reverse that. First, Tier 1, tactical, and then Tier 2, operational. Tier 3, strategic, the long-term planning, stockpiles, and resource allocation. This framework ensures logistics functions at the right scale with the right tempo across every echelon. And it prevents us from overbuilding in one area and underinvesting in another. Third, acquisition and future focus. And so for this audience in particular, the message is simple. Acquisition must prioritize sustainment as a strategic weapon. It cannot be bolted on later. Sustainment must be integrated into design and procurement from the outset. That means contracts that measure throughput, platforms designed with resilience, and networks architected to self-report their performance. Acquisition shapes tomorrow's sustainment capabilities, and by extension, tomorrow's warfighting options. Fourth, technology as a force multiplier. We cannot treat technology as simple support. Automation, artificial intelligence, and blockchain are not side tools. They are operational fires against friction. And AI predicts failures before they occur. Automation accelerates movement and reduces manpower burdens. Blockchain provides transparency and trust in complex contested supply chains. The side that fields these technologies in 90 days, not 9 years, gains decisive advantage. Fifth, contested logistics imperatives. Contested environments demand new approaches to mobility, deception, and survivability. We must build sustainment networks that can move under pressure. Hide through dispersion, harden what must stay, and deceive adversaries into chasing shadows. Protecting supply lines is no longer about defending the convoys. It's about outthinking adversary ISR, surviving first strikes, and recovering faster than they can retarget. And then finally, the core choice. The imperative to me is clear. And logistics has to be and must remain a priority. If this slips into the background, if it becomes an afterthought, then mission success and operational readiness are jeopardized before the first shot. The choice before us is stark. Do we treat sustainment as the weapon system it must be, or do we allow it to remain a vulnerability? So the bumper sticker prioritize sustainment or risk defeat. And so the takeaways are clear. Strategically reorient sustainment. Apply a three-tiered operational framework. Integrate sustainment into acquisition from the start. Leverage technology as a true force multiplier. Embrace contested logistics imperatives of mobility, deception, and survivability. And above all, make the core choice to elevate sustainment as the decisive edge. And those aren't just bullet points on the slide. These are imperatives for the acquisition community, for operational planners and sustainers in the field. They form the connective tissue between the framework we've discussed and the outcomes we have to deliver. But in the end, victory will not belong to the side that fires first. It will belong to the side that sustains. And so one more slide transition and I'll close. And so throughout today's talk, we've seen that sustainment is no longer a background activity. It is contested, it is targeted, it is decisive, which means it must be redefined and weaponized. And we built this case through transformation pillars. Contested logistics, built on visibility and agility and resilience. The defense performance score to measure advantage in real time. Innovation enabled through preemptive posture, technology aspires, hide-hardened hunt, and black swan readiness. And elite team concepts, because no network, no technology, no framework succeeds without adaptable, trusted teams executing at the edge. But the pillars alone are not enough. What matters is what we do with them. And that's where the acquisition community comes in. And so the charge is clear. Design sustainment as a weapon system from the start. Don't bolt it on after the design. Bake it into decisive capability. Measure, test, and fund sustainment with the same rigor as combat power. If it's not benchmarked, it's a vulnerability. Provide robust logistics infrastructure, ports, depots, rails, airfields that give the warfighter the foundation to win. Forge public, private, and allied partnerships that create networks too resilient to break. And lastly, balance ethical innovation with continuous capability delivery. Not in 9 years, but every quarter, every exercise. And so here's in the truth, in the wars ahead. Remember, victory will not belong to the side that fires first. It will belong to the side that sustains. And so that is your charge. That is your edge. And I thank you for your time and attention. And I relinquish my time to the handsome gentleman from Defense Acquisition University.
Thank you, General Kent. Your comments were outstanding and on point. And your discussion of logistics as a weapon system is definitely something that we need to consider and act upon, especially within the acquisition community. As mentioned, we have several questions that were provided by many of our registrants, and I'd like to cover a couple of them with you in some of the time that we have left. The first question is, as we work to develop and field advanced and predictive logistics technology capabilities, how can we maximize the use of our legacy systems to perform in the contested logistics environment?
Good. So that's a great question. Because the truth is, we won't replace legacy systems overnight. The Army, the DoD, and our allies will be working with a blended force of legacy and next generation platforms for decades. So the challenge isn't just about new capability. It's about bridging those generations of technology to perform under contestation. So I frame it like this. So the data wrappers and digital twins for legacy platforms as an example. So legacy logistics systems were never designed for real-time contested environments, but we don't necessarily have to rebuild them. We can wrap them in digital interfaces. So, think about using APIs and middleware and Internet of Things, those retrofits, to pull the data from old systems and feed them into a predictive analytics layer. And, by creating digital twins of those legacy systems, we can allow those older platforms to participate in predictive sustainment models without rewriting their entire architecture. Another layer would be the hybrid sustainment network, hybrid sustainment networks. And what that is, legacies systems can thrive if they're placed inside a multimodal redundant network. Instead of relying on one pipeline, we design logistics networks with civilian military blending and dynamic rerouting and route churn. A 40-year-old fuel truck may not be smart, but if it's moving inside a network that is optimized with AI for timing, concealment, and deception, it becomes survivable. And so the principle would be legacy hardware plus modern orchestration, and that equals contested resilience. And then the third layer, layer protection and operational deception. Legacy systems can still add value if we integrate them into hide, harden, and hunt concepts. For example, old depots can be hardened and repurposed as decoys. Now that would force adversary ISR to waste time and munitions. Or older comm systems can act as spoof nodes to mislead adversary targeting, while modern assets maneuver elsewhere. So I'm getting long-winded, I'm sorry. The bottom line is the key is not to throw away that legacy capability, but to reimagine its role by wrapping data, embedding legacy systems inside adaptive networks and repurposing them through deception and redundancy, and we can maximize their relevance. So we don't have to discard those systems. We just weaponize them differently.
Well said. I can think of countless examples where we, in the past, used legacy capabilities to support modern operations. Similar, I think you've answered question number 2. I'll go to question number 3. What are some ways to accurately and effectively keep up with the rapidly changing capabilities to support the distributed logistics operations that you outlined in your brief?
Wait, repeat that again.
What are some ways to accurately and effectively keep up with these rapidly changing capabilities to support the operations that you talked about?
Okay. So the truth is, distributed logistics isn't just about spreading assets. It's about accelerating adaptation. The challenge isn't having enough systems, it's keeping them synchronized, modern, and relevant in real time. And so there's a few approaches to that. So one of them could be innovation cadence, and use that as a warfighting metric. So if we were to measure innovation the same way we measure throughput and readiness, that could be a way. That means, fielding updates every 90 days and not every, 9 years, as I briefed. The software patches, the predictive algorithms, the logistics planning tools, those got to be pushed like ammunition regularly, predictably, and at scale. So, I'll use this as an example. AI sustainment tools that run rolling updates from theater level exercises, so warfighters are always operating on the latest models. I'd say another one be modular and plug and play systems. So the legacy logistics IT and sustainment platforms, they need modularity. If every system requires a wholesale replacement to adapt, we'll always lag. So instead, we ought to be adopting open architecture and plug and play standards so that the new predictive AI tool, sensor or blockchain layer can bolt onto the existing systems without a full redesign. And so this approach makes logistics future-proof by design and not by assumption. And then we want to get into like wargaming and digital twinning. So to keep it pace, we got to test sustainment networks as often as we test weapon systems. And, that's been a discussion for 30 years, as long as I've been serving, right? The use of digital twins of ports and depots and convoy networks to stress test them, let's say weekly, against simulated adversary actions, cyber attacks, and those events, those black swan events, right? The feedback loop from those simulations would be used to inform acquisition and doctrine in real time. And that ensures that our distributed networks evolve faster than those adversary targeting cycles. And so I hope I satisfactorily answered your question.
Indeed. And you answered the next question too, on how to advocate for those legacy weapon systems.
Okay.
Likewise, I'd like to move to our audience question and answer, since we've got a couple minutes left. And there's one question in particular that I'd like to ask, and that is the DPS trilateral index chart that you provided. How do these come together? Is it a common operational picture, or is this some risk matrix program that military leaders would use?
Well, it is, okay, so, when I was working around NATO and various countries, and, when we're looking at the 2.5 GDP spending, right? And then it was, now that's up to 5% GDP spending. But as, I went to countries, I went all over Europe. But like in Romania, I remember when I went to Romania, I met with a gentleman, and he was under enormous pressure to spend defense spending, right? To spend their defense spending. And he was looking at me to tell him where to spend it. And that was kind of a shock, because they were investing in vehicles, and they were investing in armored vehicles and all these types of things. But as we we're looking and evaluating, we had concerns about their bridges, we had concerns about their roads, we had a lot of other concerns about the infrastructure, and not to mention the threat is so close to where they're at versus geographically behind. And then I went over, go to Poland, and they're spending their money and they're buying a lot of assets. and went to Finland and Sweden as they entered the NATO Union. And every time I went to a different location, it would seem that they had different challenges. And so as I started thinking through this, okay, so 32 nations, 32 sets of shoes, they all don't fit the same, right? And everybody is just kind of rushing to buy capability and, in ammunition stores. But, to me, it was about setting the conditions for success and as a deterrent, because the deterrent was judged by Putin. So if, we're doing these exercises in the high north, but it's not causing a reaction by Russian ground forces, then it's not a deterrent, right? And so that's where we started getting into these thoughts about deception and so forth. So going back to the modeling, right? So this is a product of human machine teaming. And so it is, using the AI capability, but having a really defined framework to be able to do these types of assessments, right? And breaking them out into categories and to evaluation points. And so that methodology, but able to do it at speed, and then be able to generate a report or a grade. And so it became very statistical for me. It became a lot more scientific, right? So you have your instincts and your gut and the experience that you have, but you want to have something substantive to it, right? And open source intel, or you can elevate it to higher levels, and you can get really inspired to really kind of dig into the details. And so the idea of the DRI piece was, okay, we can measure people with their capabilities, right? But if you're not inserting the threat to it, then it's not really giving you the accurate picture, because the threat in Estonia is our threat, right? And or the capabilities that they have in Poland might be great, right? And so it's not say, hey, we're already putting a lot of money and capability into Poland. We need to put money and capability investment or encourage others in other places. But if you don't think about the threat, that actually lowers their capability because of that threat, if that makes sense. So you can have a whole lot of capability, but you can have a low level of threat, right? Or you can have a whole lot of capability and high threat. Those aren't the same. So that's how that came into play. And then it's evolved into a more of a targeting cycle, so that, let's say, the UK requires a great deal of cyber investment, because they've got a lot of capability, but they're hurting in the cyber world. You can go to Sweden, and you can play to their strengths. And like with the regional sustainment framework, if you analyze and evaluate the strengths and the weaknesses of our allies, of what they can bring to industry, right? It would signal to you where you want to make investment, or where our private and industry partners ought to be seeking to develop these public-private partnerships abroad, right? So great opportunity to build bridges and roads and highways in Romania. Great opportunity in the UK to bring cyber capability, right? And so that's really the nexus of it all. Now it's continuously evolving, and then integrating that with large language models, and workflows and those types of things that to build and stack, record, and do those types of things. I think that's it's been very, very useful. So I've been able to generate some really good analysis with it, and the idea would be to blend that with partners and convince, it's like matchmaker.com type of deal. So anyways, I hope that helped with your question.
Indeed, and I really like how that focus allows us to move beyond just procuring airplanes and tanks and what have you, and looking more holistically at providing the entirety of support to include logistics to help our partners develop their overall capabilities and support our entire ability to withstand any adversaries' advancements. So with that, I would like to again thank you, General Kent, for what a fantastic briefing. The inputs that you shared regarding logistics as a weapon system definitely got my mind going about, just the things we've done historically as well as things that we can do in the future. But more importantly to this audience, what we as acquisition logisticians and acquisition professionals need to do to ensure that the capabilities that we deliver to our warfighters are able to withstand the contested logistics environment. So again, thank you, General Kent. And I'd like to also let everyone know that next month we will have Major Tanisha Green of the United States Army with us to discuss expeditionary medical logistics capabilities on October the 22nd. And so with that, again, we at DAU would love to have you all join us for all of our events. We have the QR code here for you to register. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and other social media sites. So with that, we enjoyed your time and your attention, and please follow us at future events with DAU. Allie, do you have anything for the group, or I can let them all go?
Thank you, Dr. Marsh. Just wanted to let everyone know that today's event survey is posted in chat, so you can complete that for your certificate for 1 CLP. Please remember that that CLP will not post your transcript automatically, and you must request it separately. Thank you.
Awesomeness. Well, General Kent, again, thank you so much. It has been indeed a pleasure, and we'll definitely continue to work with you more in the future. All right, be blessed.